Link TV, connecting you to the world. Link TV is viewer supported. Watch more at linktv.org.
Link TV presents Mosaic World News from the Middle East. Here are today's top stories.
I am heartened.
Secretary Clinton joins condemnation of Quran burning plans. Israel seals off West Bank ahead of Jewish New Year. And Bahrain cracks down on human rights activists. Mosaic World News from the Middle East begins now.
The European Union has confirmed its opposition to American citizen Terry Jones's plan to burn copies of the Noble Quran in commemoration of the September 11th attacks.
For her part, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton condemned the plan. The pastor of the Florida-based Baptist Church insists that he will not back down, even though criticism of the plan has increased.
The
name of Pastor Terry Jones suddenly emerged from anonymity to preoccupy the world, politicians, and the general public alike. From here, from this small church in Gainesville in the state of Florida, which is probably only known by its few hundred followers, hatred for Islam and Muslims emerged. Pastor Jones, who announced his determination to burn hundreds of copies of the Noble Quran in commemoration of the September 11th attacks, has no intention of backing down. In a multi-religious society, this issue has caused fear among both Muslims and Christians. U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton condemned the plan and described it during an iftar held for Muslim figures as a disrespectful, disgraceful act.
I am heartened.
I am satisfied with the clear, unequivocal condemnation of this disrespectful, disgraceful act, an act that has come from an American religious leader in a multi-religious society.
Similar to the exhibition of anger that is feared by the U.S. Secretary of State, David Petraeus, the head of the American forces in Afghanistan, warned that the plan to burn copies of the Quran in commemoration of September 11th will endanger the lives of the soldiers. That same concern was expressed by NATO Secretary General Anders Rasmussen, who said that disrespecting other people's faith will put the lives of NATO troops in direct danger. It seems that the plan not only caused anger and concern among military personnel and politicians, but its repercussions also extended across the world. The Indonesian capital, Jakarta, has witnessed demonstrations outside the U.S. Embassy for the past few days in protest of the American church's plan. In the Afghan capital, Kabul, hundreds of Afghans organized demonstrations against the church's plan. Protesters held banners asking the American government to prevent the church from carrying out its plan. In Lebanon, the head of the Change and Reform Bloc, General Michel Aoun, denounced the pastor's plan and described him as unbalanced.
Obviously, this man has lost his balance and lost his mind. We are absolutely for freedom of religion. We respect other people's faiths, especially what they hold sacred.
The condemnation campaign was not limited to a few figures, but extended to the Vatican, where L'Osservatore Romano newspaper published an article headlined, "No one burns the Quran." In it, it denounced the plan, saying that it's its duty to prevent harm against Christian minorities who live in countries with a Muslim majority.
International condemnation continues over a U.S. church's plan to burn copies of Islam's holy book on the eve of the 9th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks.
To attack any religion in the United States is to do violence to the religious freedom of all Americans.
Hate is not a democratic value, and it is not a religious value.
The Florida-based church, however, insists it will go ahead with plans despite criticisms. Now, the church pastor, Terry Jones, says the U.S. Constitution gives him the right to publicly set afire the book. Last year, he distributed T-shirts bearing anti-Islamic slogans. U.S. officials have criticized the pastor's move, with the State Department describing it as un-American. Also, the top U.S. and NATO commander in Afghanistan has warned that such an act could inflame anti-American sentiments. Massive demonstrations have been held in Pakistan, Afghanistan, India, and Indonesia over the church's plan.
With a church in the American state of Florida planning to burn a copy of the Quran on 9/11, protests against the Muslim Community Center at Ground Zero in New York City, and arson and vandalism attacks against mosques, 24 leaders of America's churches and synagogues at the invitation of the Islamic Society of North America went into a private session here at Washington's National Press Club to call on Americans to reject hatred and what they called a growing anti-Muslim frenzy. After meeting behind closed doors, the group of interfaith leaders held a news conference to announce they've come up with a statement condemning bigotry against Muslims in the United States. The statement, signed by all of the mainstream religious leaders here, condemns acts of hate against Muslims and calls for respect for religious liberty.
We denounce the kind of anti-Muslim bigotry which we see across the country, in certain parts of the country at this moment, and we identify ourselves strongly with the call for religious tolerance and acceptance.
Religious leaders cannot stand by in silence when things like this are happening.
The unusual gathering was organized by this man.
This is to address the situation that has arisen, the anti-Muslim sentiments from coast to coast. And this is what bothers all of us, Muslims, Jews, Christians in this country. So that's why all leaders got together to discuss how we can respond to this.
Jewish and Christian leaders of all denominations stood up to say they signed the statement and will be telling millions of their followers to tell those who hate Muslims that they're wrong. In particular, participants blasted the pastor of a church in Florida who says next Saturday, the 9th anniversary of 9/11, he will set fire to a copy of the Quran. These religious leaders are trying to talk him out of it.
I doubt that there is anything that those of us here today could do to stop that act on the part of that pastor. I understand there are negotiations going on there that perhaps will result in that happening. I hope it does.
The group announced it's meeting with the U.S. Justice Department to tell the Obama administration it needs to speak out louder and more aggressively prosecute Muslim haters to protect America's 7 million Muslims. And they said to show the world that most Americans reject growing religious intolerance against the Muslim community. Mike Kellerman, Press TV, Washington.
The Knesset Control Committee has scheduled a special hearing after the holidays regarding remarks by a state attorney that conversions to Judaism performed in the army are invalid under Jewish law because no conversion judges were present. Committee Chairman Yoel Hassan called the comments nothing less than outrageous and put the religious standing of thousands of soldiers in doubt. Hassan said the hearing will clarify the matter and validate all military conversions. Natan Sharansky, head of the Jewish Agency, told IBA's Eli Wagelanter today that he was shocked to hear the state attorney invalidate the conversions.
So I'm a representative of the state that conversions of made in the Israeli army are not kosher, are so ridiculous. And it could be absolutely laughable if it was not so sad. I immediately informed the Prime Minister's office that the best thing which exists in Israeli society in terms of conversion is exactly the Native program, which Jewish Agency finances and supports together with the army and the Israeli government, and which is supported and recognized by all the leading authorities, including Chief Rabbinate. And I was glad to hear that Prime Minister and the government of the State of Israel have the same opinion as I have.
Staying with the Jewish New Year theme, and nowhere was the pre-holiday shopping frenzy more evident today than Jerusalem's well-known and beloved Machane Yehuda market. IBA's Ariel Reshef took to the streets and the alleyways of the bustling Shuk to ask capital city residents about their wishes for the upcoming Jewish New Year of 5771. High on the list, as you might expect for pre-Rosh Hashanah thoughts, was the hope for peace.
What are your wishes for the new year? Most of all, peace. Most of all, I get a bit
peace in our hearts and peace in Israel. Because if there's peace in Israel, there'll be peace all over the world. And on a more personal level, I hope everybody has continued health and good fortune and lots of good times in their life, lots of simchot, which are good times.
That they will be with peace and with health and with happiness for everybody, all over the world.
I would wish for peace and happiness for every Israeli.
And do you have any personal New Year's resolutions?
Health and happiness for my family.
Number one, peace. And I feel that there isn't one Israeli that I meet that doesn't want that. So that's, I don't know if the world knows that, but we want peace.
My wishes for the new year is that we should have a complete peace in all of Eretz Israel, that we should have Yerushalayim continue to be a special place for everyone to visit, and that there should be happiness and most of all health for everybody in the Klal.
And do you have any personal New Year's resolutions?
I always want to lose a couple of kilos. Chag Sameach.
اعتقالات في الضفة الغربية نفذتها مساء أمس أجهزة الأمن الفلسطينية بحق.
Last night, Palestinian security agencies in the West Bank carried out a major sweep, targeting members of 2 Hamas cells. A Palestinian security source said the cells whose number was withheld are responsible for the 2 West Bank attacks that killed 4 Israeli settlers and injured 2 others. According to Hamas, between 150 and 550 of its members were arrested in the West Bank by the Palestinian security agencies following the 2 attacks. The Palestinian Authority said that Hamas's figures are exaggerated.
والضفة الغربية تعيش ما يشبه الحصار منذ الليلة الماضية.
The West Bank has been living under partial siege since last night, as the Israeli military closure order went into effect. The closure will expire on Saturday at midnight, marking the end of the so-called Jewish New Year holiday. The closure, which affects the movement of Palestinians in the West Bank, especially as it coincides with the Eid al-Fitr holiday, also applies to the Gaza Strip border crossings. Joining us from Ramallah is our correspondent, Sharouk Assad. Sharouk, what are some of the ramifications surrounding the arrests of members of the 2 cells? Also, is Israel calling for their extradition, especially considering that the attacks were directed against it?
Yes, Ayman. Israel is demanding their extradition. However, the PA confirmed to us that they will not hand over any of these men to Israeli security agencies. Ayman, as far as the ramifications are concerned, the arrests have brought back the war of words between Fatah and Hamas. Hamas is accusing the Palestinian Authority of security collaboration with Israel. On the other hand, the PA is accusing Hamas of trying to quell Palestinian resistance in Gaza while trying to revive it in the West Bank for political reasons and in order to embarrass the PA and derail the talks. The arrests also show that the security issue remains the top priority of the direct talks between the Palestinians and Israelis.
Sharouk, how is this closure, which Israel normally imposes on the West Bank, affecting the lives of Palestinians, and is Israel committed to lifting it soon?
Ayman, Israeli closures have always been an issue in the Palestinian territories. There are between 600 and 700 Israeli checkpoints that are enforced on a daily basis in the West Bank and around Jerusalem. The only difference is that the security restrictions are normally enhanced in light of this military order. Practically, the West Bank territory, which is cut off by barriers, will endure additional security restrictions, impeding Palestinian mobility from one area to another in the West Bank. West Bank residents are also banned from entering Jerusalem under any circumstances, whether to pray, work, see a doctor, attend attend school or visit relatives. These measures not only inconvenience the lives of Palestinians, but also take away their joy of celebrating the Eid. Meanwhile, Israel is celebrating its holiday at the expense of Palestinian happiness.
Sharuk Assad, our correspondent in Ramallah, thank you very much.
While the preparations are ongoing for the second round of direct negotiations, set to be held in Sharm el-Sheikh with the participation of the U.S., Hamas saw the resumption of negotiations as a delay in the National Reconciliation Project until further notice is provided. This comes as the Palestinian Reconciliation Committee confirmed that it is still exerting efforts to achieve national unity as the inevitable demand of the Palestinian people. This report by Aman Arakat.
According to some, the resumption of Palestinian-Israeli direct negotiations and the resulting collision of internal Palestinian positions was reason for the stagnation and delay in the national reconciliation. According to Hamas, there is an American will that aims to stall Palestinian national reconciliation, and based on that will, the Reconciliation Committee was unable to achieve national unity.
The resumption of the negotiations meant the closure of the reconciliation file, and sadly this means that the reconciliation project has become a secondary issue. In truth, I am not optimistic about this reconciliation, as no real efforts are being exerted, even from within the Reconciliation Committee.
The National Reconciliation Committee, established under a presidential decree that was issued on June 5th, confirmed that contact with other Palestinian parties is ongoing, both internally and externally, even though the committee's presidential decree has expired.
In light of the new developments, we are now having a temporary period of re-examination. Without reconciliation, we are unable to accomplish anything, neither in the negotiations nor in the resistance. Unity is one of the rules of all liberation movements. Without unity, there is no victory. Without unity, we cannot attain liberty, the right of return and independence.
The attempt to link the resumption of direct negotiations and the delay in national reconciliation was met by the Palestinian negotiation team with confirmations that achieving national unity will be possible, regardless of the proposed political choices.
If you want these negotiations to succeed, the unity of the Palestinian people is a very essential matter. All that we bring with us to the bargaining table will not be enough if our people don't fully support President Abu Mazen and the negotiation team, so they can accomplish the goals President Abu Mazen went to Washington for.
According to the National Reconciliation Committee, it will resume its rounds and meetings with Palestinian parties in the next few days. Fear over another failure of the direct negotiations and the national reconciliation files is met by a majority of the Palestinians who believe that the success of those two files requires political will among all parties to accomplish the desirable goals. Iman Araikat, BBC.
In an interview with the BBC, Iraqi Oil Minister Hussein al-Shaqistani warned that Iraq's political deadlock could negatively affect the security situation. He added that 6 months after the general elections were held, there are fears of widespread return to violent acts.
Inside and outside private spaces, there is no conversation to be had other than that of the political deadlock still witnessed in the country 6 months after parliamentary elections were held. The political reality of the 6-month stalemate might be painful for some here. However, there are other problems that seem even more painful, such as the electricity crisis, unemployment, and daily violent attacks. Some don't believe that the formation of the government will produce major changes. Rather, it might make the situation even worse.
We will have more problems if a government is formed because the losers will not concede defeat and the situation could go back to the sectarian violence we saw a few years ago.
The stalemate witnessed on the Iraqi political scene has cast its shadow on all citizens, regardless of their sect and affiliation. However, the majority agrees that the only benefit to ending the political vacuum probably relates to the security situation.
I think the security could have been.
I think the security could have been handled more firmly. Now the terrorists are hoping that by having these political differences, they can penetrate through the cracks in the political system.
Penetrate through the cracks, if you like, in the political system.
Here, on the stage of one of the Iraqi capital's theaters, artists are getting ready to present a black comedy about the relationship between the politicians and the people.
The fact that the government has not yet been formed is pure comedy. We can make fun of the government, but we'd rather not because of lack of security.
Uday is being asked by the government to tone down his satire and criticism a bit. However, those overseeing this artistic work say that their only aim is to highlight the concerns of the citizens who live off of the promises of officials, saying that there is no solution to their problems and daily struggles.
In Bahrain, the trials of terrorist suspects accused of plotting to overthrow the ruling regime of Manama has opened. At the end of its periodic meeting held in the Saudi city of Jeddah, the Arab Gulf Ministerial Council called on countries around the world to seriously deal with terrorist groups and anyone sponsoring them.
السلطات البحرينية تعكف على فك خيوط الجماعة الإرهابية.
The Bahrain authorities have launched efforts aimed at dismantling a terrorist group that is accused by Manama of plotting to overthrow the ruling regime through unlawful means. The Bahrain General Prosecutor's Office ordered a full investigation into the case of terror suspects.
المتهمين الذين ما زالوا محبوسين على ذمة التحقيق وتم عرضهم جميعا على الطب الشرعي واعترف متهمون بما نسب.
The suspects, who remain in police custody pending the conclusion of the investigation, were ordered to appear before the state medical examiner. The state prosecutor said that while some of the suspects have confessed, others denied the allegations. Among the charges facing the suspects are founding and running an illegitimate network, seeking to disrupt and undermine the state constitution and legal system, as well as plotting to overthrow the ruling regime of Manama. Other charges include plotting to carry out acts of terrorism and raising funds to support a network that sponsors terrorism.
النائب العام في البحرين أكد أن جميع الضمانات القانونية.
Bahrain's Attorney General said that all legal rights of the suspects have been taken into account during the investigation process. The suspects are standing trial on charges of terrorism, incitement and use of force through unlawful means.
والوسائل غير المشروعة والتحريض عليها. وفي تفاعلات القضية دعا وزراء خارجية دول مجلس.
In response, the Arab Gulf Cooperation Council foreign ministers called on all countries, including Britain, to refrain from granting asylum to Bahrain's opposition activists who are accused of taking part in the plot.
المجلس الوزاري الخليجي أكد تضامن الدول الأعضاء مع البحرين وتأييد.
The Gulf Ministerial Council has voiced solidarity and support with Bahrain's authorities. Manama has launched efforts to counter terrorist activities and all forms of incitements and acts aimed at destabilizing the regime.
تهدف إلى زعزعة النظام والاستقرار. حكومة البحرين على خلفية تداعيات القضية قررت الإشراف الكامل على المنابر الدينية.
The Bahrain government has decided to fully monitor religious sermons and houses of worship after the suspects were detained on charges of incitement and collecting funds pledged by local and foreign sources under fictitious business names.
تحت غطاء تبرعات رجال أعمال وتجار.
Khalid Al-Kashif, Arabiya.
العربية.
آبار المياه الجوفية تحولت إلى آبار للصرف الصحي.
Groundwater wells have turned into sewage wells. The rivers are polluted by the waste of factories and home construction material. To complete this cycle, this polluted water goes back into people's homes, either through their tap or in enclosed transportation devices. For those who think that the problem can be solved by chlorine, we bring you the following report by my colleague Basil Al-Aridi.
It is said that Lebanon's groundwater is currently being drained. But with the low levels of precipitation and the scarcity of water, in addition to the lack of water regulation, people do not have an alternative to drinking groundwater. This has led to the presence of water wells all over the country. These cargo trucks transport water to homes directly from the artesian wells. Some of it will be used as drinking water, and the rest for other household uses. An official source from the Water Ministry, who refused to reveal their name, said that the groundwater in Lebanon is contaminated because of the sewage infrastructure. He added that the laboratories of relevant ministries sterilize the water with chlorine and then distribute it to the homes. But some researchers believe that the matter is not so simple. Trihalomethanes, or THMs, put people's health in danger. THMs are chemical compounds used in a number of industries and are considered to be contaminants that could lead to cancer. They are produced in the water sterilization process, which uses chlorine, especially in sewage water or water containing organic material. THMs have major effects on health, which has prompted many governments around the world to ban its use in water disinfection. But what about the laboratories? Do the special institutions routinely inspect water samples before it is bottled and ready for home consumption? And is all groundwater tested in laboratories? Doctor, do the laboratories test for THM?
So far, we are still preparing for this test. It is important to test for the elements so that people aren't afraid to drink water that has chlorine or fear that they will get cancer immediately. If this material accumulates through time, then it could cause cancer.
An amateur photographer took these pictures. He says that the water came directly from the river. These water bottles are being sent to another city where they will be used by some companies in their advertisements. Another obvious problem is the exposure of these water transporting devices to the sun, which kills many vital and basic elements for human health. Moreover, local companies conduct routine inspections to guarantee that the water exported to other countries meets foreign standards. As for the water that cannot pass the test, its only option is to be sold on the local market. This is the bank of the Ibrahim River, which is witnessing a high percentage of contamination because factories and construction sites dump their poisonous waste in it. This water pipe runs to several villages in the district of Jebel. However, seeing that it's not covered, some people take advantage of it for their own convenience. At the spring of water, you feel thirsty. But as long as the water under and above the ground is contaminated, no one in Lebanon can quench their thirst. While waiting for a solution, people would rather be fasting throughout the whole year. Basal Al-Aridi, New TV.
The views expressed on Mosaic are from contributing broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. The production of Mosaic is made possible from support of viewers like you. Thank you. Watch Mosaic World News online. Stay up to date with breaking news. Read our blog. Get transcripts of past shows and more at linktv.org/mosaic.
This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Link TV is the only U.S. network dedicated to global and national news, uncompromising documentaries, and diverse cultural programs which connect you to the world.